What is up, everybody? Bootman here, and we are back with another Marvel Snap video. And ooh, do I have a treat for you. Today, the video is a little bit different, and it might be the first of many in the future, we'll see. But I actually brought on another Marvel Snapper, another content creator, and probably the smartest Marvel Snap player I've ever come across, and it is Jeff Hoogland. So I reached out to Jeff, said, hey, you wanna come on the channel, chat about a few topics regarding Marvel Snap? He agreed, and this is the conversation. But before we jump into that, if you're new here, hi, my name is Chris, AKA Bootman, and if you love this game as much as I do, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. Join this awesome community we have here, and we're trying to reach 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We got 2 more days, and I think we could do it. All right, but anyways, just to kind of set the foundation for this conversation I have with Jeff, Jeff is one of the first content creators I came across, and I noticed his content was different than a lot of others, right? He was very smart, he has a lot of experience, he has like 20 years in the competitive card game scene and everything, and I will link everything of his down below. But anyways, I made a video, which a lot of you found me by a few weeks ago, and it was about kind of like content creators misleading audiences about what decks will get you to infinite and how to reach infinite, right? And one of the reasons I asked Jeff to come on is because we were on the same page about this. I've heard him discuss this. And, coincidentally, Jeff actually made a video about it on his channel today, discussing a specific content creator. And I highly recommend that you go check it out because it's what I discuss a lot. But I'll make it clear, and Jeff feels the same way. Like, don't go like harassing any content creators or anything like that. I don't think many people do it like purposely, nefariously, right? But it is important for you, the viewers, to be skeptical of any creators saying this deck will help you reach infinite. And we've discussed this at length, especially with the new season coming up. But most importantly, and we discussed this in our conversation, but like you have very valuable, scarce collector's tokens and you don't want to go out wasting them on cards that are not going to help you reach infinite if that is what your goal is. If you just want to have fun, go ahead and do it. But if your goal is reaching infinite, be very skeptical. So I asked Jeff, about like ethical clickbait, what we could do as creators, what decks actually help people reach infinite, what kind of decks are these, what kind of strategy, we discussed cube management. Jeff is somebody who pushes cube management quite a bit. And for those of you who know me, I am not a fan of turn 1 snapping, and Jeff actually does believe in first turn snapping. So we have a little debate about that. But yeah, Jeff's a great guy. Make sure you head down to the description, check out his Twitch channel, his YouTube channel. He makes different content than most other people. He has a degree in mathematics, so he goes and breaks down like the bundles coming out and if their value matches like the price and all that stuff. So really cool. But anyways, I'm gonna shut up now. Here is my conversation with Jeff Hoogland. All right. Hello, Jeff. Thanks for joining me. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Beautiful. So we're going to talk a little bit about Marvel Snap. So for the few people in my audience who might not be familiar with you, can you give us a little bit of your background, how you came to Marvel Snap and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I've been making various strategy card game content on the internet for a little over a decade now, whether it's written content or video content. I've been doing video content on twitch.tv as well as YouTube for the last 5 years now as my full-time job. Before I started doing Marvel Snap, I had a big focus on Magic the Gathering and other strategy games, played a little bit of Runeterra and Hearthstone and everything else over the years as well, but Magic before Snap was always my primary focus.
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard you talk a little bit about this on stream and everything. What is it about Marvel Snap? Like I played Magic like in middle school. This is the first card game I've gone back into, but it reignited all these memories. But I've heard Magic the Gathering is kind of like fallen off with some weird stuff they're doing. But is there anything about the gameplay of Magic compared to Marvel or the other card games that are going around? What is it that drew you to this?
Not even to say something negative about Magic, but just to speak to the kind of quality of gameplay that Marvel Snap creates and provides. I think Marvel Snap is very clearly a culmination of decades of lessons learned in
Mm,
the industry. Broad pioneered Hearthstone almost a decade ago at this point, and it was very innovative and improved on a lot of things at its time. And Marvel Snap even goes one step further than that. I think the if I had to pick one thing that Marvel Snap does better than other card games, it's making variants feel less bad. And there's two things I think that contribute to that. The first is that it's easier to shrug off bad variants with the short gameplay length. You're like, all right, I had a bad beat, but that was 3 minutes. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
And the other one is the cube system. The fact that even when nothing goes my way, I still have the player agency of, okay, I'm going to mitigate my loss and leave here, still gives me a sense of control as the player.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to clarify, when you're saying variants, like the variants of like things that can happen within the game, not like the card differentials and all that. Okay,
Yep.
cool. Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I had some other questions, but we're going to jump into it because you're talking about, like the cube system and everything. So I was in your stream towards the end of the day, and you and I have different opinions on this. I think we're somewhat on the same page. I hate first turn snappers. All right. But I live in Las Vegas, used to play some poker. And I get what you're saying, and maybe you can lay it out for the audience real quick, because my audience is like, yeah, no first turn snapping. But so what are your thoughts on it and like having the hand? Because my opinion is you don't see the locations. Sometimes you don't even know what type of deck the other person's playing. So how do you mathematically calculate that first turn snap in your head?
I think there are a subset of decks where snapping on the first or especially by the second turn is often statistically optimal. And the
Mhm.
two that jump out in my mind as ones that I often snap the earliest with are Mr. Negative and Lockjaw. So specifically with Mr. Negative, you'll basically always see me snap on stream when I have Psylocke into negative because it's just
Mm.
such a powerful setup for that archetype. And similarly, Lockjaw, the same way. I have a Lockjaw, a Sunspot, and a Wasp in my hand, and a bunch of really fat units in my deck that I can flip out into play for value. I'm statistically favored in that game because of my opening hand, and I want to make my opponent get committed more to that game before they see I think I'm favored.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. Like for me, my issue with first term snapping is like the perceived cockiness on the opposite side, right?
Yep.
So let me know this. So my deck, the deck that I've used like pretty much 2 seasons in a row, two core cards in it are Shang-Chi and Enchantress, right? Those two cards can stop a lot of things on their
Yep.
own. So is that something that you're ever concerned about, snapping that early when you're not sure if they have cards like that in their hand?
Well, and I think the two decks I called out there in the case of Lockjaw and Mr. Negative, they're both decks that when they really get going and are strong, they can play through a single piece of disruption. To use a
Okay.
poker analogy for a second, just because you snap on the first turn doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win. It just means you think you're favored to win, right? It's like you have
Yeah.
pocket aces or pocket kings, especially in a more
Mhm.
dynamic manner. You're like, I'm strong position now, and I want to push some people out before they get a chance to catch up.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And like, sometimes like for me, because worst case, if you don't stay in too long, you just lose 2 cubes if some things go sideways, a bad location, and all that. But yeah, I have these upset feelings that I need to manage when I see someone snap. I'm like, what do you think I have over here? But
Well, and to even
go
talk
ahead.
about the deck, like you said, with Shang-Chi and Enchantress, I think most decks that play those types of interactive cards, they almost never want to snap early, right? Like you want to
Yeah,
collect
that's the
information
thing.
about
Yeah.
what your opponent is doing before you know, okay, I'm favored here because my interaction is actually good.
Yeah, yeah. The deck I play is definitely late game because Magic's in there too, and I make a lot of things happen on turn 6 and 7. So I'm sitting there like I need to see something. So maybe it's just for the strategy I'm playing. But now that I'm infinite, like you, I like to experiment with more decks. I don't got to worry about the grind up to infinite, all that stuff. But speaking of infinite, one of the main reasons I wanted to connect with you and everything. Another thing that we're on the same page about is kind of the community or even the narratives that go around about the grind to infinite, how easy it is, how hard it is. Like, I don't know if I might have emailed you about the video I made about 7 proven decks to get to infinite. And when I was looking through them, a lot of them weren't meta decks. There was like 2 with leader and only 1 was like the leash leader combo, right? So what do you think are some like misconceptions about getting to infinite that people need to get out of their heads when they're watching like, unethical clickbaiters, you know what I mean?
Well, I think the one thing, and I think I haven't even addressed this enough in my own content, is just the volume of time it takes to get to infinite, right? Like even someone playing well and playing a good deck is going to spend a lot of hours getting to infinite. And I
Mhm.
actually missed infinite the first 2 months I was playing Snap. And part of the reason I missed wasn't because I wasn't even necessarily playing well and I was still learning, but you just start lower on the ladder, right?
Yeah.
It's easier to get back to infinite in a season when you're starting from 70 than when you're starting from 10.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So something I've been like racking my brain with is trying to figure out what the main thing is holding people back from Infinite, right? Because I've gone to Snap Fan, I love that website too, and I've seen people with low collection levels hitting Infinite, right? Some of them like purposely stay down there, like pull one, pull two, to hit Infinite. But like the three variables that I see are, either you don't have the right cards, so you think. There's the RNG, random locations, bad hands, but then there's also cube management. And in my opinion, I think a lot of the reason people don't reach infinite is because of poor cube management. But from your experience, the people talking in your chat, what do you think is holding people back from reaching the higher ranks?
Yeah, I think you definitely nailed it with cube management. And it's a sub game inside of Snap. And it's another layer whenever you're trying to learn or master a deck as well, right? Like cube management looks different when you're playing different decks. Like we were just talking about, right? Like your
Yeah.
Shang-Chi and Enchantress deck manages how it snaps very differently than a more proactive deck like Mr. Negative or Lockjaw.
Yeah. For sure. So when do you have like a rule of thumb on retreating? Like, is there something that you look for or like probabilities, where you're like, this is not going to work out?
So one thing that I think is worth calling out is there's actually been a lot of good videos I've seen talking about things like concepts like pot odds and like if you're a
Mhm.
50-50, you should be saying and stuff like that. But one of the things a lot of those videos don't get into is you often aren't calculating everything that's possible in a given situation. To give an
Mhm.
example, you're playing against a deck that say is a destroyer deck and you're like, "Okay, I'm 50-50 against the destroyer here. They play here, I win. They play here, I lose." And then
Mhm.
you play out the last turn thinking you're 50-50 and they flip fucking leader up and
Yeah,
beat you with leader.
exactly.
And you're like, "Well, I was 50-50 against the thing I was thinking about, but I was much worse than 50-50 against this other range of things," meaning
Yeah.
this was a bad call because overall I'm actually less than 50-50 here.
Hmm. So that's definitely something like leader, and you and I like I've been saying this too. The thing about leader is there's no like tell, right? When people were doing leech leader, you can kind of see it coming. Someone dropped leech, you're like, okay, now I can strategize. But I've seen people just tossing it in like discard decks, destroyed just all over the place, right?
I got leadered out of a multiple man deck the other day.
Yeah, people just putting it in there. So so like with that being said, right? So I'm thinking it's a destroyer deck, but now most of us are like leader can be anywhere. How many different situations are you considering before you retreat on like the last turn? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and honestly, part of the thing that I think is most frustrating about the current leader metagame is it's made making educated calls and retreats harder because it's harder to predict the output range that your opponent could have. And even when you're considering leader and the outputs that their deck could have, a lot of the times when you run through the permutations of what could happen, you're like, all right, the plays that beat leader here lose to literally everything else. And it's just
Yeah,
like, well, I guess I'm supposed to beat everything else and lose to the leader. And
yeah.
sometimes they had it and you lose, and sometimes they didn't have it and you win.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember this because you stream so much, but maybe it was like a week ago. So I was watching your stream and then you actually included in your null video, but there was a match where you were playing your turn six like there was a leader coming, right? And then they didn't play leader and you lost it. And I was so glad that you left that in your YouTube video because you talked about it after about how you can't just like constantly be thinking of leader because there are a lot of people who don't play leader. So how have you kind of changed your strategy, just taking that into consideration? Because I was making the same mistake too, thinking leaders everywhere and then just doing really dumb moves.
Yeah, it honestly just ends up with me losing equity in some spots and gaining it back in others. The one of the things that was very different in Snap coming from a game like Magic is frequently in Magic you get into a spot where the statistically optimal play is making them have it. But in
Mhm.
Snap, that dynamic was often different because you could predict what was in their deck, and then they were 75% to have it on the final turn. Well, leader changes that dynamic. And in a
Yeah.
lot of spots, I'm just down to the okay, I'm going to play around the card that's likely to be here based on their deck archetype. And if they have leader, they have it and they got me.
Yeah, yeah. Then you just kind of take the hit. That's what I try to explain to people. Like, if you're doing good cube management, you can lose a series of games, and then when you're really confident, you get 8 cubes back. You know, it's like kind of just like little small steps back, larger steps forward, and you kind of like creep your way back up.
Well,
But
or if you're just playing well, the streaks go in both directions, right? Like you have a
yeah,
day where you like lose a bunch of 1 and 2s and gain a bunch of 1 and 2s, and then another day, you hit a couple of 4s or 8s in a row and it swings back in the other direction very hard.
yeah. So something that I've always struggled. Like I've been on YouTube for years. I just started making gaming content, but something that I know you discuss as well is like kind of like ethical clickbait. Like we all have to do it. Like my background's in marketing, right? I know you got to get a catchy headline, an eye-catching thumbnail and stuff. So like how do you do it where you got to get views, you got a family to feed, obviously, right? But without, I don't know, without like not fulfilling that promise. You know what I mean? Because my issue is when I see best deck. The other day I came across a video that said like 217 and 0 win streak with like the double She-Hulk Dino deck. I'm like, no, that's not it. I have a pretty decent win percent rate. It's like 53% or something, you know? So how do you balance that? Getting people in, but still being ethical about it, you know?
Um, I think the big thing or line that I draw in the sand for myself personally is the clickbait stops when the video starts is the big one
Yeah.
that always gets me. Is like when I if you stretch the truth on the title or the thumbnail, and then that truth continues to be very elastic when I open your video, it's like this is not great. Like getting
Yeah.
people in the door is one thing, continuing to kind of fabricate or stretch or manipulate once they're there, I think is really bad form. And obviously that's a
And
personal thing. I'm not the YouTube morality police. That's
yeah,
just what
yeah.
I do that works for me.
Yeah, I sit here like one of my favorite types of books is like reading about moral psychology and philosophy. So it's always like going around in my head. But like, what are your main concerns? Because I think my main concerns are two things, but mainly with the token shop, right? Now that the token shop dynamics in there and tokens are so hard to come across, my concern is somebody's going to see a video. Oh, this will get you to infinite. Someone shows all of their wins, none of their losses, and people are out there dropping 1,000, 3,000, 6,000 tokens that's going to take a month to get back on a mediocre card. So that's one of my concerns, but also that there's just money involved for people paying for like upgrades and credits and stuff. So do you have like any concerns like that, or is it more just like Jeff's a good dude, don't do unethical stuff, but while worrying about these other people,
Kind of a side tangent or something I've thought on a lot about this, and I've gotten feedback from my own viewers. Is I think a really common misconception I've seen from people is that having some amount of stats automatically makes your thing more valid. And
Mm,
something that a lot of people don't understand is that mathematically speaking, having a small amount of bad data is generally worse than having no data. And it's
mhm.
like, well, what's your win rate with this deck? It's like, well, my win rate's like 70 or 80%, but like I've
Yeah.
also only played like 2 dozen games with it, right? And it's like not big enough to make a strong consideration that's purely data driven.
Yeah, I right before we started recording this, I just released a video about 7 books to make you smarter about this. And it's about decision making. Like I'm bad with numbers. You have like a background in math, right? But I've learned like the basics, right? Like a sample size, and like not basing my decision making strategy on the results, but like how I came to that decision. Because you can get lucky in a game. And it's something that I'm trying to get people to kind of consider, because you can build a bad deck, make a bunch of dumb plays, and get really lucky, right? Like I can flip a
Yep.
coin and get 5 heads in a row, but that doesn't mean that's going to keep going. So with that, what kind of decks do you like? If somebody was brand new and they had an unlimited option of cards, like what kind of decks do you see as most successful, or what do you take into consideration when building a deck? Because I've seemed to notice that the meta decks aren't as good as we think. They're like kind of easy to play. They're kind of fun, You know, they can put out big stats, but they're not always the ones that are ranking up. You know what I mean?
I think at the base level, the types of decks that I always recommend people play are that are newer to card games are the ones that are proactive and worry about executing their strategy first and being kind of disruptive second. By something like
Mm,
the Kazoo deck when you're starting out in Series 1 and Series 2 tends to be very good. You're just like putting your stats into play and making your things as big as possible. The kind of second level to playing with that is having counterplay to your opponent's interaction, but you're not like actively trying to disrupt them so much as you're trying to stop them from disrupting you.
yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense. And you know, speaking of like newer players or just even people who've been playing for a while, something else I've noticed, especially when the new cards came out, like in your stream, people are like, "Oh, change this." Like you lose one game, and they're like, "Oh, toss in Killmonger. You played against like one zoo deck and stuff," and you're always like, "Hey, you got to play this for a minute." Do you have any kind of hard like rule for like how many games you play with the deck before you make adjustments or anything like that? Because I know there's people listening or watching right now who are tweaking like after every single game and not getting
Yep.
like proper input. So how do you evaluate before making adjustments?
Um, uh, Another Magic player often said that being good at card games is the process of making uh, decisions from statistically insignificant sample sizes based on feel. And it's just
Mm,
one of those things, it's just like with experience comes those, okay, I'm not knee jerking reacting to this situation. This is something that's going to come up frequently. This is an average
mm.
case scenario. Most likely, we need to adjust to account for that. And that question, I think, is the big thing players need to ask themselves. And sometimes you need to play more games to get to the answer. It's like, okay, this thing that just happened to me, how likely do I think that thing is to happen again? Could I
Mm-hmm.
have played around it with the tools that I already have? Or should I be making an adjustment to allow me to play around this thing that could be commonplace in the future?
Yeah. So I don't remember what it is, but you have like three questions someone needs to ask. Like it's like a rule in your in your chat, right? When people make like a deck recommendation, what are those three things that they need to be doing when they make that suggestion?
Well, why should we add the card that you're suggesting? What problem does our deck currently have that adding that card solves? And what card should we be replacing with that card? And then, kind
Mhm.
of a corollary to that third one is you also should be thinking about, well, what potential new problems am I creating by cutting the card that I'm cutting to fit
Mhm.
in this new solution? Because usually it's all trade offs, right? Like I'm solving one problem, but I could be creating others, and are the other problems I'm creating equally or less likely or more likely than the one that I'm trying to address to begin with?
Yeah, yeah, that's something that I've been trying to like take into consideration because I've been experimenting more. I'm like, okay, just kind of let it chill for a minute, see what's going on because I have noticed that when I take something away, you know, like I was running like you know an Angela, then I replaced Angela with a Black Widow, you know, so it was doing a little disruption, but also taking away some stats and stuff like that.
Yep.
But with a little bit more of your time, Jeff. So like my background is in competitive gaming, but I'm talking like Counter Strike, like first person shooters and stuff. And card game competitive gaming is so new to me. What do you see that looking like with Marvel Snap and with tournaments and things? Like what I guess like what would a format look like to you that would be like ideal? Like do people go in? Do I say, hey, no leader? I get to take that out of all your decks or something like that? Like, is there anything like that? What is that looking like?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different directions they could go for that. I think the big question for competitive Marvel Snap will be, are we going to have a multi-deck format where you like ban one or some number of your opponent's decks like games like Hearthstone and Runeterra do? Do they want to approach it from a, okay, you have a small side deck like Magic does where in between games you trade out some number of cards in your starting deck and your side deck and then play another game with that? I will say the battle mode that's supposed to be coming in January sounds like a great format for leveraging the snapping and cube mechanic. Both players get 10 cubes to start with, and then they lose those cubes without regaining them as the game goes on, with the first person getting to zero losing the round.
Got it. So, you know, with certain games, like there's a set of matches that you'll play, right? To kind of balance just in case you had bad luck, bad draws, I'm assuming bad locations. How many do you think would be good to kind of like decide who the better person is, even though there's some level of randomness still no matter what. But is it like 3? Is it 5?
Well, so that's the beauty about the proposed battle mode from Snap is that it's not a predetermined number of games, right?
Mm,
Like in theory, with each player having 10 cubes, you could play 19 games before someone is fully out of it. If you have a bunch of 1 cubes being traded back and forth, the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. You know, a lot of games are going to be 1 to 2 or even 4 cubes, and I would bet you're probably going to play 7 or 8 games in an average match if 2 players are equally matched with good decks.
yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense. So to kind of wrap this thing up, something that everybody's been talking about and thinking about, what are your thoughts on the current token system? Because I know you've talked about how they've designed this game so you don't get the cards too fast, but like, do you think they've reached that medium ground where you're getting new cards or Series 4, Series 5 enough? You know what I mean? Because like getting 1,000 tokens at all takes a while, right?
So the core thing that I think players need to understand about what Second Dinner has envisioned, I'm not saying this is good or bad, but like I
Mhm.
think a lot of players have a misconception about what Second Dinner has envisioned for their card system, and that is Series 4 and 5 cards are supposed to be for players that are Series 3 complete already. They are
Mhm.
essentially end game content the same way an MMO or another lifestyle game that you're playing in a very different manner coming from other card games would have end game content. And by and large, if you don't have every Series 3 card, you should probably be ignoring the Series 4 and 5 cards.
Yeah.
And the key to that kind of system working is that there can't be power creep or power spikes in those Series 4 and 5 cards, right? You know, if a new card comes out and it's cracked in half and only the end game players have access to it, that doesn't create a very good environment. So
Yeah.
far, with the handful of releases that we have, I think they've done a good job of threading that needle. You know, Century is honestly borderline bad. Null seemed reasonable, but it's pretty narrow in its applications.
Mhm.
Darkhawk seems like a fine card and one I've been enjoying playing, but it's one that gets hammered by the same answers that
Mhm.
Devil Dino gets hammered by, for example.
Yeah. What do you think the solution is? Is say I've saved up 6,000 credits, I get Galactus tomorrow. Ben Brode said it was on a watch list. They nerf it. Do you think there's a solution for that? Right? Like I get this card, expected something, and all of a sudden I don't want it anymore because of that, and it strictly says no refunds.
Well, I think the key to that is also, again, inside of good game balance. So I've been playing Marvel Snap since the beginning of the closed beta practically. And
Mhm.
in that time period, there's been pretty much one card that's been nerfed to the point where it doesn't see metagame play anymore. Almost everything else still sees play after adjustments. The Mr. Negative deck we've been talking about, for example, my preferred variation of that has cards that have been nerfed, I think 6 times total between
Really?
all of them. And it's still just like a very good deck that I enjoy playing that helps me get up the ladder every season.
Yeah, yeah. In my short time, just even the recent nerfs, to like Angela and Mysterio, both of those were in my main deck. I was like, they're still playable. You know what I mean? But
Yep.
last thing before I let you go, what upcoming card would you say you're the most excited for? Is there anything on the horizon in the coming months from the little data mines?
I'm actually really looking forward to Stature. She's a 5 cost 7 power card that becomes 1 cost if your opponent discarded a card over the course of the game. And I'm really
Mm,
hoping that her addition will give us a second playable card that I think Black Bolt enables her to the point where he probably starts to see play because he'll make her cheap
yeah.
consistently.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that does sound good. Yeah. Me, I'm excited for Ghost, where it makes it so your cards go last because I hate being ahead in a game and then I lose because my Shang-Chi is gonna go first. So yeah, there's some cool cards coming. But Jeff, thank you so much for your time. You are a very smart guy. I tell everybody you're one of the smartest snappers out there. I get a lot of inspiration for my decks from you. So before I let you go, where can people find you? Where are you? And all that good stuff.
I stream full time at twitch.tv/Jeff Hoogland. I'm there Monday through Friday from about 9 a.m. Central till about 4 or 5 p.m. Central in the afternoon. Over here on the YouTube side, youtube.com/Hooglandia Snap, I post deck highlights, game news updates, and everything Marvel Snap related there 7 days a week, usually somewhere between 1 to 2 videos a day. It's a great place to keep up on myself and all things Snap.
Beautiful. And yeah, for anybody watching, you make a good variety of content too. And you even talk about like the money being involved with the new bundles and everything. I love it. But yeah, thanks so much for your time, Jeff. And maybe we'll do this again in the future.
Yeah, awesome, Chris. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, that was my conversation with Jeff Hoogland. And by the way, I apologize for any time I've mentioned Jeff in the past. I realize his last name is pronounced Hoagland. So public apology for that. I always say, like with my last name being Boutte, I try to be very careful when it comes to pronouncing last names, all right? But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about some of the topics that we discussed. What are your thoughts on leader and the nerfs or, snapping early, all that kind of stuff? Let me know down in the comments. Another huge thanks to Jeff. Head down to the description. Make sure you go check out Jeff on Twitch. He streams daily. I usually like have him on while I'm working during the week just to see what decks he's trying, the decks he's building. Just get some of his genius when it comes to this game. But also make sure you check out his YouTube channel because he makes little bite-sized like clips and discusses different topics and all that kind of stuff. All right, but anyways, that's all I got for this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new, make sure you subscribe, ring that notification bell, join this awesome community. We're trying to reach 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. All right, but other than that, have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.